Alright, so good afternoon class. I'm Brandon Herndon, and today I'm going to tell you how, by knowing your food, you can save the planet. But in order to save the planet, you have to know what's the biggest thing threatening our planet. So what's the world's greatest problem?
Hello, I'm Alan Savory, a Zimbabwean, and I represent two organizations, an International Savory Institute in New Mexico and the Africa Center for Holistic Management in Zimbabwe. What is the biggest threat to humanity that we've ever faced? Frankly, it is climate change, which most people think is almost entirely due to fossil fuels. But in reality, you'll find that it's due to massive environmental malfunctioning. The world's vast grasslands and savannas turning to deserts, billions of acres being burnt, the agricultural destructions of soils with the vast release of carbons that entails, and fossil fuels. And of the two, I believe agriculture is the greatest contributor. Desertification or land degradation has destroyed many civilizations, and now it's threatening us globally.
All right, so what's the world's greatest problem?
Agriculture.
Agriculture, which why is agriculture the world's greatest problem? Desertification, food, because it contributes to climate change. It contributes to climate change, not because what you drive to and from work in your car, because of what's on your plate. Okay? Because what's on your plate is directly related to agriculture. So the key is, so what's the solution? What can we do about it? What can you do about it? Who wants to do something about it or change the world, right? Who wants to be a positive impact on the world, okay? So what's the solution? The solution is grass. Okay? All right. No, not that grass. Not even close. This is actually part of the problem. Okay? Not even close. We're getting warmer now, okay? We're getting warmer. Wait for it. Now that's grass. Okay? Wow. That's the kind of grass I'm talking about. That's the kind of grass, if you're a cow walking through the field and you see that, your eyes get about this big and you start salivating, you'd be like, oh man, I want to eat some of that. That's the kind of grass I'm talking about. So the question is, okay, so how can grass be the solution to agriculture? And it's actually pretty easy. It can be the solution by grazing animals on it, okay? So you're turning something that we can't consume, can't eat, into something that's a consumable product. But then you ask, didn't he just talk about desertification, right? Who's heard about grazing animals causing desertification? Or who knows about that, right? So grazing animals on land, erodes the soil, causes problems. And the answer is yes, it does cause desertification. It does destroy the environment. Our current methods of raising animals do contribute to our carbon footprint. And we know with slashing and burning of the Amazon rainforest to clear them for pasture to grow your next burger, right? So we clear them for pasture, we put animals on there, we set stocking, by the way, is setting animals on one piece of land, not moving them around at all until that land's used up, the fertility's used up, and then you move them to another patch. And you can see it basically comes into making stuff like you see in the lower right corner in Africa, desertification. I'm sure you've all heard about desertification in Africa and people grazing animals there, and they're basically just losing their grassland. But the key is, is there a better way? So there is a better way.
Did you know our grasslands are turning to desert? These grasslands that are so important for life. They hold soil in place, store water, store carbon, and feed billions of life forms. 1/3 of the Earth's land surface faces the threat of desertification. Imagine the impact of losing our grasslands on civilization, on the Earth. What if I told you that we had the power to change it? But to change it, we must understand it. Imagine a world of large herds of caribou, buffalo, and other grass-eating species migrating over the lands with their predators. The soils, plants, and animals developed together and lived in balance. Large herds grazed, defecated, stomped, and salivated on the land, which built soil and deepened plant roots. Over time, however, these wild herds have almost entirely disappeared and have been replaced with a low number of sedentary livestock. This disrupted the balance of birth, growth, death, and decay. Grasslands depend on biological decay to survive. And without it, desertification persists. Desertification has long been blamed on overgrazing, too many cattle, sheep, and goats. Although not backed by science, this belief led to human policies and technologies to control desertification, such as removing animals and rejuvenating grasses with fire, further contributing to the problem. Wildfire does offer short-term benefits by removing dead material to allow new green flush. It also destroys soil cover and puts carbon into the air, causing long-term damage. Destalking animals allows the land to rest, but over-rest inhibits biological decay and can lead to fires. The process must be biologically active. Grass needs animals to thrive.
All right, so that's the better way. Grass needs animals to thrive. And what they're talking about here is what's called holistically managed land, okay? So what we're trying to do is use a natural cycle like in the past. Who here has seen the movie Dances with Wolves with Kevin Costner, right? Remember the scenes in that movie of the huge bison moving across the Great Plains, right? You've all seen those videos of how our Midwest used to be, okay? So we used to have these huge herds of grass-eating animals, and what they would do is they would eat grass, which is right in front of them, okay? And then they would poop, and then they trample on it just once maybe, and then move forward. And they never look back. So they would migrate across the land, leaving behind them tilled up soil and fertility, and the grass would have time to fully recover before those herds returned to that same place. So because that grass had time to fully recover, what happens is in the grass life cycle, so the grass in particular and all plants like to mimic below the soil, what is on top of the soil. So you have grass, okay? Here's the soil level, and you have root systems underneath, right? So as seen in that picture there. So when a cow or bison or sheep or anything comes, and it trims the grass down to this level, right? So now there's the grass is, a third the size it was. What happens is the roots die at the same rate. See? But the root mass is still here. So what happens is this root mass decays, and actually, because the grass breathes in CO2, everybody knows that plants breathe in CO2, which we exhale, correct? So it's a very symbiotic relationship. So the grass breathes in CO2, this root mass decays, so the soil's built from the ground. The soil's built from the ground up. So with holistically managed land, what happens is you allow this grass, like the natural cycle used to fully recover, okay, and grow roots. So now the ground level's up here, because this roots are gone, and you grow additional roots, and the soil's building from the bottom up. Okay, so you're actually building soil. As you build that soil, you sequester the carbon that's in the atmosphere into the ground. So you actually have a carbon neutral, or if you do it correctly, a carbon negative environment by pulling carbon out of the atmosphere and sequestering it into the ground just by grazing animals. Who here has seen, unfortunately, the farmers and cows you see around here, they're not grazed that way. So everyone here has seen Virginia Tech as a big dairy farm, right? And almost every field you pass along the interstate here, and including Virginia Tech, they practice what's called set stocking. Okay, so it's set stocking, that's how you conventionally manage grass-fed animals. So in set stocking, what happens is you don't allow nature to complete that cycle. So what happens is that cow is allowed to go and trample on one area, eat this, but then they want to go to the next blade of grass over there, but they can't because there's a fence there, so then they have to eat what's in front of them. So they never let the grass totally regrow. Because they keep walking on that same surface, what they end up doing is they end up exposing the soil. So the roots get cut off, right? Or the roots die off when it gets cut. But then they don't have time to fully regrow. Then it eats it shorter, then it eats it shorter. And eventually you have no grass left. And eventually you have erosion. And then you start losing your topsoil that sequestered carbon to the atmosphere, and the topsoil gets washed away. And because there's no grass there, the more grass and more roots you have, the more CO2 it can inhale, the more CO2 it can deposit into the ground and sequester. But if you have set stocking, it doesn't allow it to do that. So now that we look at that, the question is, well, what if we don't have any animals at all, right? What if I want to be a vegetarian and I don't want to eat animals at all? Well, that was the thought, people at Sierra Club, people at Animal Welfare, that was a thought for a long time, we don't need to produce meat. If we didn't produce meat, we wouldn't have these problems, we wouldn't have these erosion problems, right? But in actuality, not having animals on the land is not part of the natural cycle, because it's not part of the natural cycle, because that's what's not naturally there. Animals are naturally there. But as of right now, they're not there anymore because we removed these large herds. So as you can see here, just be a vegetarian, right? Well, not quite. On the right-hand side is native African grassland that has had animals removed from it. And they said, we're not going to hunt these animals anymore. The bison are the, water buffalo aren't there anymore because their hunt numbers have been reduced so much, but we're just going to leave it how it is. And the left-hand side is holistically managed grassland where animals have been brought back in very large numbers and then not allowed to return to the same piece of land until the land has had adequate time to recover, like the natural cycle had in the past. So you can see this actually builds soil. Imagine all this grass, the root mass beneath it, all the CO2 that this grass is taking up versus that bare dirt on the right side. Okay? So what about conventionally managed land? So that's without animals at all. So with conventionally managed land, here's two pictures. This is taken on exactly the same day of the year. Okay? The left-hand side is a piece of land upstream from the right-hand side, and the left-hand side is a holistically managed piece of property where it's allowed to fully rest and recover before the animals are allowed to return to it. The right-hand land is a rancher that manages it conventionally, just leaves his animals in one spot and says, oh, they got enough grass for the year, they'll be fine. Okay? So you can see the differences in the two ecosystems between the left and right side. There's a lot more CO2 being sequestered on the left-hand side versus the right-hand side. But right now, all we've been talking about is grass-fed. Okay? Who here is? When was the last time you ate meat? This morning? Yesterday? Who has eaten meat in the last day? Raise your hand. Okay. Keep your hand up. Keep your hand up if you know that meat was grass-fed. For sure. Okay. So maybe one. Okay. Half a person out of the whole class. This is just grass-fed. So that means all the other meat that you just consumed is not grass-fed. It's industrial produced. Okay. So what about industrially raised animals? Let's do a little case study real quick. So we need to know your food chain. So in this case, we'll look at beef. We'll do a beef case study. By the way, beef is another name for cow flesh, for those that didn't know that. So beef. So beef all starts in the same place. We've all seen the cows on the side of the road driving into tech. Very pastoral setting. You say, there's my next hamburger sitting right there. And what a great life that little cow has, right? Going in to get my hamburger. So regardless if it's industrialized meat or grass-fed meat, they all start in the same place, okay? So you have a little calf raised with its mom. The difference is we're going to go to the industrial side now. The industrialized side, so the farmer brings the calf to market about 5 to 6 months old, and that's how the farmer makes a profit. It's called a cow-calf operation. So the farmer raises calves, sells them at the market, and then large corporations buy large numbers of what they call feeder calves to fatten up. And where do they fatten them up at? They fatten them up at the concentrated animal feeding lot. And they do this because this is currently the cheapest and fastest way to put weight on a cow in order to be used for meat, okay? And that's why the companies, these large corporations, do that. How do they get to the concentrated animal feeding lot? They truck them vast distances with the help of Mr. Petroleum, right? Okay, which releases CO2 in our atmosphere as it's burned. Now what do they feed the cows at the concentrated animal feeding lots? They feed them corn. They feed them corn because it's the fastest way and cheapest way currently to put weight on the cows. Well, what goes into this corn? This isn't the corn you can buy at your store. If you took a ear of this corn and roasted it and chomped down on it, you would spit it out, okay? This corn is extremely high in starch to get the most gains per pound of corn for the cattle, okay? So what goes into it? Fertilizers. Fertilizers because where the corn is grown is in the Midwest. And the Midwest was so fertile before because of all the bison for thousands and thousands of years building up the soil in the Midwest. But now that we've removed the bison, there's no fertility anymore. They've drained the soil of the nutrients. They've released all that CO2 in the atmosphere already. So now they have to add fertilizers, which are based on petroleum to grow the corn, okay? So they use petroleum to grow the corn. What else do? They use Roundup on the corn. Who here has sprayed Roundup on a plant before? Raise your hand. What happens to that plant? Anybody? It dies, right? You spray Roundup on something, it dies. Guess what? Not this corn. This is special corn, okay? This corn is genetically modified by the chemical company. One of them is Monsanto. Monsanto is the company that owns the patent on Roundup. This corn is genetically modified. So if you're a farmer, you can go out, nuke your field with fertilizer, this oil, petroleum-based, right, non-renewable energy resource. Go and nuke, put your seeds down, and then right after the corn starts coming up about this high, you go and you nuke your field with Roundup. And guess what? Everything dies but the corn. It's great, right? Makes it super easy to manage. The problem is Roundup, also known as glyphosate, is a persistent chemical that remains in the environment, remains in corn, gets transferred to the meat you eat, and also resides in your body as well. And your body can't process it, it builds up over time. It's also been recently linked to as a carcinogen, so it causes cancer. By the way, these pesticides and chemicals that we're spraying on the corn that we feed our cattle in the concentrated animal feedlots, they're all petroleum based. So all this is adding constant CO2 input into our atmosphere, into our environment from Mr. Petroleum. Okay. So now we're back to the concentrated animal feeding lot. So they're eating corn. Okay, the corn has all the chemicals on it. It's not that bad, right? What else are they eating? These conditions, as Cadet May had a brief in the other class about CAFOs, these conditions aren't the greatest. Does this look like a natural setting for a cow? It doesn't, right? And because it's not a natural setting, they're knee deep in poop all the time. They get sick. They get really sick. And they're not supposed to eat corn either. If you fed a cow corn naturally, it would die within 6 months. So in order to keep them from dying and keep them healthy, we pump them full of antibiotics. Because so many of them get sick, we give antibiotics to all of them. Okay? So we don't have to worry about who gets sick and who doesn't. Not only antibiotics, we feed them the GMO corn and all this stuff. So the antibiotics are kind of like the top block here. And remember, the key here is corporations own this meat, okay? So they want to produce your food cheaply and quickly. So what's cheap and what's quick? How can they get these cows fat? How about cement dust? How about some molasses? How about urea, which is urine? How about some feathers? How about hooves, chicken manure, cattle manure? What can we pump into these cows and mix a little, why do they eat it? Because they mix something sweet, where is it? Molasses, right? They mix molasses in it, okay? So they mix molasses that tastes good to the cow, right? So they mix molasses in it and make this fish meal and peanut skin and brewery waste and stuff that cows aren't supposed to eat to fatten them up quick, right? Yummy. And remember, you are what you eats, okay? So this stuff is going into the meat, which gets concentrated in the meat, which then you consume, which goes into your body. Yum. Oh, and how much of this stuff is, you got to think, going back to the corn, this corn here, it's got all those petroleum inputs to grow the corn, okay? You have petroleum inputs to grow the corn, to harvest the corn, to fertilize the corn, to pesticide the corn, to round up the corn. Then you got to harvest the corn, then you got to dry the corn, then you got to truck the corn from where the corn's grown to one location, and then use more oil to bring it to the concentrated animal feeding lots, right? Imagine all those energy inputs that are oil-based, non-renewable, going into this system, this industrialized corn system, our industrialized system. What else comes out the backside? Open waste, okay? So manure that would otherwise fertilize the fields, instead of being that carbon from the manure being sequestered into the soil and building up our soil and building up our fertility, we're not building up our fertility, we're stripping the land from the corn. And instead of building our fertility, we have all this methane and CO2 that's being released in the atmosphere from these open waste manure pits. It's also polluting our groundwater because they consider these things farms, and farms are exempt from the food and water protections. Okay? All right, moving on. So from there, we use Mr. Petroleum then, because they have to go to the slaughterhouse. All right, so this is where you take a cow and turn it into beef, okay? So the industrial slaughterhouses are a little bit different than the mom and pop operations I like to use for my animals. So the industrial slaughterhouses, there's only 4 companies in the entire United States that produce about 80% of our beef. Okay, and those 4 companies only control a little bit less than 10 slaughterhouses. So you have a little bit less than 10 slaughterhouses providing millions and millions and millions of pounds of beef that's arriving on your plate. Because there's so much throughput, it's really hard to be sanitary, it's really hard to be clean. The conditions we workers are really dangerous, and they run through a lot of workers. A lot of them undocumented, illegal aliens that don't have really good conditions to work in, and those are the only people they can find to fill the job because they really need the money back. Okay, from there, from the industrial slaughterhouse, we have help from Mr. Petroleum again, because it gets, remember, these cows get trucked all the way to the slaughterhouse, and they get trucked from there, packaged, frozen. It takes energy to freeze stuff, right? It takes energy to keep stuff frozen, using oil again, and it goes all the way to your favorite local fast food joint. Okay, so you have your nice corn-fed, nicely marbled with fat burger. So how long did this trip take? On average, the average piece of food that you have on your plate travels over 1,500 miles. And that's just the distance the cow travels. We're not even counting the distance the corn travels to get to the cow, or the energy inputs in the cow. And also, what about that corn-based cheese, or the corn-based special sauce, or the corn-based ketchup? Okay, everything's corn. But I digress. So what about the grass-fed version? Okay, so we looked at grass-fed. So here's how I raise my animals. Cow-calf pair. Same thing for goats, which we'll get to later. But cow-calf pair raised on grass. Three major inputs, right? We have input of water, input of sunlight, and input of pasture. And out the backside comes the poop again. Yet this time the manure is used for fertilization. So it's the carbon and stuff in the manure goes into the soil uses it. The soil grows the plants taller. The plants get taller, they breathe in more CO2 and they sequester more CO2 into the soil, okay? So this method, when managed well, as we saw before using holistic management, this method is actually carbon neutral or even carbon negative. Okay, so we're actually, by eating meat, we're actually removing carbon from the atmosphere. And if you're a vegetarian, sorry, but you need the manure from animals to provide fertilization for the soil. Otherwise, when you grow crops that you eat, if you're a vegetarian, you have to get that fertilization from somewhere. And if you're not getting it from animals, you're getting it from petroleum-based products. Okay. So then, not all things are equal. Okay, not all things are great. So this process still uses a little petroleum. I mean, I have to drive my goats 2 hours down the road to get to my processor. My processor, Joe Cloud, here he is right here. He's a local processor. He's animal welfare approved. I really care about my animals. He cares about the animals too. It's a life. It's sacred. So he takes that and he makes meat out of it. He's a local abattoir. He employs about 10 people locally. They've got a really good quality of life. He pays them a really good wage. They have benefits, and it's a much different atmosphere than the industrialized, slaughterhouses. So from there, I got to go pick up my meat. Takes a little bit of petroleum again. I'm not driving all the way across the country with tractor trailer trucks though, right? And then my little, Volkswagen hatchback driving 2 hours down the road. So I go and pick up my couple 100 pounds of meat that I had processed, and eventually it's frozen. I sell it, and it ends up in your nice grass-fed burger. So would you like your nice grass-fed burger, or do you want this? Okay. And the thing is, okay. So say you're not even going to fast food. Say you're taking that meat and you're making a hamburger at home, and it looks just like this, okay? So your grass-fed burger and your industrialized burger look exactly the same and taste to you exactly the same. Maybe the industrialized burger a little bit greasier. Maybe it might even taste better to you, right? Because it's greasier. But the thing is, what about the carbon footprint? Even if it looks the same, the inputs here are not the same. If you look at local meat, so you have these black boxes, okay? So the black boxes are the portion of carbon footprint that local food would have compared to non-local industrialized food. And this is in tons traveled per kilometer. So for every ton per kilometer traveled per household per year is what this is. And just a little aside on the beef, if you produce localized beef, who knows what a calorie is? A calorie is just a unit of energy, right? So it takes 1 calorie of oil of locally produced food to produce 2 calories of beef. So 1 calorie of oil for local beef gives you 2 calories of beef output, okay? With the industrialized side, it takes 55 calories of oil to produce 1 calorie of beef. All right? So moving on. So what do I do about it? Oh, last thing is, not only is it different, it's actually different at the molecular level as well, right? So you are what you eat eats. So in that case, you have 80% less fat, 30% less cholesterol, and grass-fed beef is proven to be heart healthy and anti-carcinogenic. Baby false. All right. So what do I do? So I really get interested in this, so I'm doing learning through action. My action is my little farm I created. You can kind of see my little farm shirt here. Hoof-Hearted Farm is the name of my farm. I really want to take care of my animals. I view this as food with integrity. I want to eat food with integrity. I haven't eaten industrialized meat in over 5 years after I started looking into the processes and where it comes from. So I want to produce animals with integrity because I care about the welfare, and I want to have integrity for the environment too because I care about the environment as well. So that ties into my mission statement to produce healthy, ethically raised food while practicing grazing management that heals the land. So that's my goal. So here's one of my happy animals. Here's a goat, just in lush, pasture, and it's like this every day, okay? So it's like they're eating ice cream every day. They're the happiest animals you've ever seen in your life, okay? It's really great. I've got a really good relationship with them. Here's a picture of kind of how I manage my animals. So, you can't have the herds of old. Blacksburg really doesn't want goats roaming free and grazing as they go through the city. So I have to use electric netting to confine them where I want them, right? But I use the electric netting to mimic the natural cycle of the buffalo of old. So the netting concentrates on a very small area, okay? But I move them every day, just like the bison used to. And so you can see the bottom half of the field I've already grazed. And actually, if you look really close, you see lines across the field, okay? That's where I've moved them every day with the net. And it took me about 2 months to get all the way around this field. And by the time I got to the beginning, the grass was rested enough and was ready to be grazed again. So it's almost like a continuous cycle. So they fertilize, and it really concentrates the urine and manure and evenly distributes it over the field as you go. That way you don't get all the manure around the water tank or all the manure in the shade where they sleep all day, okay? Really spreads the fertility out to the field and helps sequester more carbon from the atmosphere. Now it's a happy goat, huh? What do I eat? What do I eat? Okay, got some red clover and broadleaf plantain and high fescue there, and it looks great, huh? He's happy. He's like, ah. Here's a rough area where I was trying to improve on my neighbor's property, and there's actually 6 pigs. I threw in here 2 of them to help till it up a little bit more because the pigs like to dig a little. They're actually on the right side of the brush. You can't really see them. The brush is about this high, but you can't really tell. The goats have already started to go and work on it. So this is looking forward where they're going to go, and looking behind them where they have been. This is where they have been behind them. And so this helps really stimulate the land, and it takes out all this old dead brush. It's going to stimulate growth, and that new growth comes. So by eating it down, it's chopped off that bottom half of the root. So by chopping off that bottom half of the root, I'm building the soil, and these plants are going to grow back again, and now I'm sequestering more carbon. Okay, saving the planet, one bite at a time. All right. We like to, hang out with our goats a lot. They're pretty interesting animals. I chose goats, by the way, because they're really easy to handle. They're small animals, so I didn't need to buy any large equipment or trucks to transport them. I just get my little hatchback and attach a trailer to it and drive them up to the processor and take them wherever I need to go, right? So it's really good. So that's my wife giving them some goat treats when we're moving them for the day. This is me looking at them. I wore this because it's sort of my uniform when I go home. This is my outfit I wear when I'm hanging out at home. And this is my goats as when they're in the field. Kind of hanging out in the afternoon, watching the sun go down. But we never forget what they're for, right? They are food. And, but I take care of my animals. I bring them to an animal welfare approved processor. They play a role in life. Everything dies eventually anyway, but they're used to help save the planet. So by sequestering carbon in the soil through their grazing practices. So here's some nice loin chops we had a few weeks ago for a spring dinner, and there's a nice spring salad with some asparagus risotto. Asparagus comes in the spring with some loin chops. So I just want to encourage you to eat smart, eat local, save the world. Remember the biggest threat to global warming is not what's coming out of your tailpipe, but it's what's on your plate. And I just want to leave you with a quote. It says, "I can no longer overlook." This is from Organic Gardening. Okay, this is an editorial in here. This is coming from a vegetarian, but it's okay. She supports eating meat, but she doesn't do it herself. She says, "I can no longer overlook the contradictions of factory-farmed meat eaters. How can a friend who advocates bike riding for environmental reasons eat a hamburger when industrial farming is one of the greatest contributors to global climate change, much more so than transportation? Or how can a family member who is fanatically concerned about following a healthful diet happily tuck in a sautéed chicken breast when the majority of poultry consumed in this country is fed a prophylactic diet of antibiotics and other drugs which go into your body, which we in turn ingest, and when raw poultry often carries pathogens including E. coli, which is a telltale sign of fecal contamination? There should be no room for industrialized meat on their plates, or anyone else's for that matter." So I thank you for listening to my brief, and if you have any questions, you're around. Thanks. you.